Alright, so Steven Universe was back again this week for another rollout of brand new episodes, and kicking things off was the episode entitled Gem Hunt. This episode marks a very important milestone in the character development of Connie, as she's finally allowed now to come along on gem missions. This is a pretty huge moment overall, because I mean, as far as we know, Connie is the first human who the crystal gems have really allowed in and to be part of their world. I mean, we saw how they always kept Greg at arm's length despite his relationship with Rose, and Steven had to do a lot of growing and maturing on his own before they really started allowing him to go out on missions. This episode is interesting too because it showcases the master-sensei relationship that Pearl and Connie have worked out together. It's clear Pearl feels really comfortable around the young girl now, even joking in a way that she never would around Garnet or Amethyst. This dangerous wilderness mission brings them face to face with a pair of twin corrupted gem monsters who actually remind me a lot of the behemoth enemies from Kingdom Hearts. The team splits up to cover more ground, and from here we get to see Steven and Connie on their own. These are two characters who really do balance each other out. Connie's a thinker and a planner. Steven, he uses his heart and his gut most of the time. They're a great combo like peanut butter and jelly, burger and fries, or perhaps to put it more specifically, sword and shield, but I'll come back to that later on. Now, up until this point, whenever the show would deal with corrupted gem creatures, it was always in a monster of the week style fashion. But ever since the episode Monster Reunion and everything that happened with Senti, Steven has a much different view on the corrupted gems. Now, he feels bad for them. He knows that they were as much victims as anyone. And it's because of that when it comes to hunting these two new corrupted gems, Steven has a bit of a heavy heart going into it. That being said, the whole situation starts to get a lot more complicated when they find more humanoid tracks mixed on in with the monster ones. These tracks shockingly turn out to belong to Jasper, who is once again back and making things hard for our heroes. Being in a prolonged fusion has really seemed to affect her mind. She's more bestial and feral now than ever before. In fact, what with the snowy settings, I got a very strong Wolverine versus the Wendigo vibe from this episode. In the end, Connie and Steven must use all the skills they've accumulated so far to overcome the monsters, and in an interesting twist though, in an episode that's all about, you know, responsibility and proving what you can do, Connie doesn't let her ego get the best of her and actually does ask Pearl for help when the time comes. I like this turn of events because usually in shows like this, it's only after the young pupil screws up will they eventually decide to ask for help. Here though, Connie used the good judgment that we knew she had and ended up making the proper choice. In summation, Gem Hunt was a fun little field trip episode that let us see our favorite Steven Universe characters out of their element and in a brand new setting. The action is solid and there's some great laughs to be had. Steven had me chuckling quite a bit with all of his phone shenanigans, and there's at least one really good Scooby-Doo reference in here I quite appreciated. Overall, I'd feel quite comfortable giving this one a 7 out of 10. Now, the next episode in our rollout was entitled Crack the Whip, and as we join the episode, Pearl and Garnet have decided to go off on their own to try and combat the Jasper threat. She's stealing corrupted gems, and we know that can't be good. This means that training and watching the kids for the day falls to Amethyst, the gem who really could care less. Now, I've stated it numerous times before, and I'll state it again, the main 3 crystal gems in this show all take motherly roles to Steven, except for Amethyst, whose relationship is more like that of a big sister. And that's what really the first half of Crack the Whip is all about, Amethyst being the fun one, treating Steven and Connie to a day out on the town. But you know, it's more than just good-natured goofing off. Amethyst is actually sharing with the kids and by extension the audience her whole philosophy towards life. Life and by extension combat, of course. The kids have been learning under Pearl so far, and she's very well read, very bookish, and very uptight. Amethyst is of course the complete and utter opposite. She's loose, she's laid back, she's casual, oftentimes chaotic, and it's served her pretty well so far. And I mean, really, when we stop and think about it, she's a veteran of the Great Gem War where there was a lot of death and destruction, so she must have been doing something right. Could this possibly be because on the homeworld, Amethysts are raised to be soldiers, and even though this Amethyst came out defective, she still has some of that implanted combat training? That's all up for debate. What we know for sure though is that our hero's nice day out is ruined by the reappearance of Jasper, who is now riding one of the corrupted gem monsters. Yeah, wouldn't you know it, Jasper is actually attempting to gather an army of corrupted gems. Wow, this is really something here. Corrupted gems can actually be browbeaten and strong-armed into servitude. This becomes extra disturbing when we once again remember the events of Monster Reunion, and not all corrupted gems are wild monsters. There actually is some shred of humanity left in them somewhere. Amethyst attempts to take point in the battle against Jasper, and she gets royally destroyed. I mean, just up and down, decimated. It is ugly. Worse still, Jasper takes this opportunity to rub salt in Amethyst's wounds. She talks about how broken and pathetic she is, and that if Amethyst came out right, she would be big and strong like Jasper is. This is some pretty heavy stuff, and you have to remember, you know, up until this point, Amethyst has been like a freewheeling and dealing character who never let anything get to her. She never felt her limitations, even though she was arguably limited, and now all of these things are just smacking her right in the face. Ultimately, Jasper is only run off when Steven and Connie fuse together into Stevonnie, pooling their powers and riding line into battle sword and shield in hand. That's pretty amazing. You know, it's funny, we've seen Stevonnie a couple times now in a few episodes, and never did I think there would be a tactical advantage to Stevonnie coming out in battle. And yet there totally is. Stevonnie is faster, stronger, taller for one thing, and capable of wielding both sword and shield masterfully, kinda like Rose. Now, you would think this was a happy ending and everyone would be due for some pats on the back, only that's not the case. Amethyst feels worse than ever that Stevonnie had to come save her. And I mean, really, look at it from her point of view. All day long, Amethyst has been playing the teacher, the adult figure, and now she just got schooled. The student became the master. This is showcased quite wonderfully in a visual sense, seeing as Amethyst rushed her reformation so she could get back into the fight as soon as possible. She looks all haggard now because she's only half done. Crack the Whip ended up being a really great episode. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it anywhere else before, but Amethyst is my favorite of the crystal gems, and this was a wonderful focus piece for her. Up until now, she's kind of been shown to be the class clown of the crystal gems, but she clearly has a lot of layers, a lot of pathos, and that will be explored more in the next episode. Until then, though, I would give this one an 8 out of 10. Now, the third episode in this week's Steven Universe rollout was entitled Amethyst vs. Steven, and this one really is the continuation of Crack the Whip. As we join the show, Steven is being celebrated by Garnet and Pearl for all the good work he did running off Jasper while they were away. Unfortunately, Amethyst, it seems, has fallen into an even deeper depression since last we saw her. You'll remember during the Tower of Mistakes song that she sang last season, needing to feel needed is a real button for Amethyst, and now that it seems that Steven has surpassed her in combat skills, she feels that she's starting to lose her place within the crystal gem hierarchy. Factor in too Jasper's cutting comments about her coming out defective, and the fact that, well, Amethyst is the youngest of the crystal gems and as such is probably treated like a child even amongst the other two. It's just a real bad scene. Amethyst decides to maybe try and win back some of her confidence by sitting in on Pearl's combat class. This is a funny scene because we get to see Pearl act essentially as a homeschool mom, complete with Pearl points. This plan ends up backfiring on Amethyst completely as Steven manages to outdo her in every one of Pearl's little trials. She actually ends up feeling worse at the end of things. Steven, feeling her sadness and how strange she's been acting, he goes out of his way to try and make her feel better by flubbing a video game fight. This turned out to not be the right thing to do, as it once again only made her feel worse. With no options left, they decide to settle this problem the only way they know how, by taking it to Fight Club, of course. This ends up being probably one of the best choreographed fight scenes they've done in the show in a long time, both Steven and Amethyst pulling out a lot of old tricks as well as some moves we've never really seen before. This fight, too, is also a nice showcase for the fact that Steven's greatest power might be his dumb luck. The fight ends in a truly hilarious stalemate, with both Amethyst and Steven deciding that they both have a lot left to learn and a lot of growing to do, and as for now, they can both deal with the fact that they suck pretty much equally. In the end, Amethyst vs. Steven was a cool little episode and another nice focus piece for Amethyst as a character. It was perhaps not as biting as Crack the Whip, but still pretty enjoyable. Overall, I would feel comfortable giving this one a 7.5 out of 10. And with that, we finally come to the big one of this week's Steven Universe Steven Bomb rollout, and that is the super special double-length episode entitled Bismuth. And I mean, really, when Steven Universe's double length, all that means is that it's as long as your average TV show. Now, right off the bat, you knew this episode was going to be something special because it forewent the usual title card segment by actually integrating that in the credits within the episode itself. As the story goes, while screwing around in that strange, never quite explained pocket dimension that exists within Lion's Mane, Steven ends up accidentally disturbing a bubbled gem. That gem turns out to be Bismuth, one of the original members of the Crystal Gems during the Great Gem War. Fun fact, Bismuth is voiced by Uzo Aduba, best known for her role as Crazy Eyes in Orange is the New Black. In fact, Bismuth drops a couple references in this episode that I feel had to have been talking about that show. Garnet and Pearl are positively ecstatic to see Bismuth again, assuming that she perished in the war. They're so happy, in fact, they don't bother to question why she was bubbled inside Lion, assuming only that Rose must have bubbled her in an attempt to save her life during a battle. In fact, we find out that she's been away for so long that not even Amethyst knew who she was. Eventually, the team has to break it to Bismuth that she's been locked away for about 5,000 years, and in that time, pretty much everyone she knew has died. Now, at first, everything seems fine with Bismuth. She's a little loud, a little over the top, but she's funny and seems to be good-natured. But slowly and surely, the cracks start to form around her. For one, unlike Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl, for whom the war with the homeworld has been over for a while now, maybe not peaceful, but enough for them to throw down roots and kinda sorta raise a surrogate family with Steven. For Bismuth, though, this is not the case. In fact, she demands that the Crystal Gems rearm themselves, which means, hey, all of our characters get some fancy schmancy new weapon upgrades. Now, we already know that gems on the homeworld were created to fill a purpose. Pearls were servants, rubies were frontline infantry, and bismuths, as we find out, were laborers, craftspeople. Essentially, they were the ultimate blue-collar gem, and as we find out in this episode, Bismuth made all of the weapons that the Crystal Gems have been using. You know, that's funny. I always assumed that those weapons were hard light constructs that came from their bodies, you know, sort of like Green Lantern and all of his shtick, but guess not. Steven starts to sour on Bismuth, though, once she starts moving the Crystal Gems in a much more aggressive, much more militaristic direction. It's clear that while Garnet joined Rose's rebellion so that she could live together as a fusion, Pearl joined because, you know, she had a love and admiration for Rose, and that Amethyst just kinda joined because Earth is the only place she ever knew. Bismuth, though, on the other hand, we find out her deciding factor for joining the rebellion was, well, there's no good way to say it. It was hate and anger. She hated the upper crust, as she called them, the ruling elite, the diamonds. Her view of Rose in a conversation she has with Steven seems to be quite fanatical, actually. There was a lot of shades of Andrew Ryan and objectivism in Bismuth's speech about how, as a builder, as a creator, she was never able to have any ownership over what she built, but Rose broke her chains and allowed her to self-determine in a way that no one ever had before. Eventually, Bismuth trusts Steven enough to show him the super weapon she was working on before she got locked away, something that she hoped would have ended the Great Gem War in the Crystal Gems' favor, a weapon capable of not only poofing a gem, but breaking them. Oh my god, it's the frickin' stake driver from Bloodborne. Are you seeing this, or am I just crazy? As you might have guessed, Steven is horrified and disgusted at the idea of this weapon of mass destruction, and it's at that point there that all the blocks start to fall in place and you understand why Rose locked Bismuth away. Actually, in a really interesting kind of bit here, it's made clear that Bismuth doesn't quite grasp the idea of sons and children, and I mean, why would she? Gems don't have children. She just assumes that Steven is Rose taken another form. You know, it's funny, Jasper kinda does the same thing by just assuming Steven is Rose. This leads to a massive fight wherein Steven must battle for his life in a way he never quite has before, and in the end, he's kind of sort of forced to kill. Well, okay, kill in the gem sense. He has to poof Bismuth, but he's never had to poof another gem before. This is especially sad too, because all the while Steven is trying to reason with Bismuth, trying to find common ground with her, but, well, he can't because she's a radical, she's a fanatic, and her mind is already made up. However, in the end, Steven does choose to do something his mother didn't, and that is come clean to the other Crystal Gems about what Bismuth really was and why she needs to stay bubbled for the foreseeable future. If you couldn't already tell, I freaking loved Bismuth as an episode. This is another slam dunk home run for Steven Universe. The theme of freedom is really strong and explored throughout this episode. Rose and her rebellion wanted to fight for a future wherein gems could self-determine and live whatever life they wanted, where they could make choices, grow, and change. But one of the big problems with freedom and free will, as Steven discussed discovers in this episode is sometimes people choose wrong. Sometimes, like Bismuth, they choose evil. And in a way, even Rose chose wrong. She was a military leader, and from a tactical standpoint, it made sense to control the flow of information to her people out of fear that maybe some of the other gems actually did believe in what Bismuth was spouting. And so she lied, covered up the truth, and kept a sentient, thinking, feeling creature in a prison with no key. It wasn't right, and Steven fully realizes it wasn't right, because that's the other thing about free will, is that we can choose to be better than those that preceded us. Steven chooses to be better here, and it's a really great feeling. Yep, without a doubt, this one is another classic, and I couldn't give it anything less than another perfect 10 out of 10 score. And finally, the last episode in this week's rollout of brand new Steven Universe episodes was entitled Beta. Once again, we check back on in with Amethyst, who is still in frumpy mode, having not completely reformed after her fight with Jasper. We find out Amethyst wants nothing more than a rematch with Jasper so she can win back her pride that got bruised. Steven, though, has other ideas. He wants to check in and see how Lapis and Peridot are doing. They sure do seem to be getting along a lot better than last we saw them. Peridot's even introduced Lapis to her favorite Canadian TV show, eh? They've also moved their relationship into full-on odd couple territory, having completely redesigned the barn and turned it into a place for outsider art. Peridot, of course, puts great meaning and thought into her art. Lapis, not so much. You know, it's funny, this discussion of art and everything, I wonder if this is the writers kind of tagging the fan base who love to examine everything that this show does. When Peridot sees that her friend Amethyst has her mind on payback against Jasper, it causes her to drop a major bomb that we never once considered, and that is that the Jasper who's been causing all this trouble for our heroes, yeah, she was born on Earth too, at a completely different kindergarten beta. Wow, this is the second time now Peridot has dropped some huge information bombs on the audience and the characters in the show. You would think they would want to pick her brain a little bit more. Our heroes decide to take a little field trip to kindergarten beta because, as the wise man once said, to defeat your enemy you must know your enemy, and what better way to find out about Jasper than to quite literally see the hole she crawled out of. Turns out kindergarten beta is actually a lot newer than the prime kindergarten we've been seeing all throughout the show at this point. It was established midpoint during the Great Gem War so Homeworld could drum up some more soldiers to fight the rebels. Because of that, the whole operation was a lot more slapdash, and you get the feeling that this place probably turned out a lot more defectives like Amethyst. Jasper, though, she wasn't defective, as Peridot says she might very well be the greatest quartz soldier she's ever seen. And then, of course, we hit the other big reveal of the episode, and that is that Jasper has turned the kindergarten into her new base of operations, housing corrupted gems there to feed her now ever-growing army. And it's on that killer cliffhanger that the episode decides to end. Beta is definitely an episode that tried to deliver the best of both worlds when it comes to Steven Universe episodes. You had funny, wacky shenanigans with the gems, Peridot and Lapis proving that sometimes opposites most definitely attract, and I can only imagine the writers have all sorts of comedically mismatched situations to throw them into next. And then you also get your lore and mythology building, which, you know, I was definitely all about. This is all definitely a prologue to something much bigger and much more explosive, and you can bet I will be back again to talk about that next week. Until then, I would give Beta a 7 out of 10. So until then, that will just about do it for me. As always, down in the comment section below, be sure to tell me what was your favorite moment from this week's offering of brand new Steven Universe episodes, and what do you hope to see in the future. Until next time, everybody. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching my newest video. I hope you enjoyed it, and while you're here, why not check out another video I have on offer, or maybe if you're feeling in a supportive mood, you want to like or subscribe. And if you want to support the creation of more videos just like this one, then please by all means check out the Kate Joel Patreon. A little bit goes a very long way, and I will see you all next time.